What's good, IB Nation? Welcome to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It's IB Nation Sports Talk. That guy is Jesse. I'm Vince. And we're obviously both here because our main man, Sean Stiers, is in Blacksburg. Is that where he's at? Virginia Tech?
That seems correct.
Does that seem accurate? I can't even remember these. He's a traveling man. He's made a lot of stops, and I don't remember where he is on a day-to-day basis. Let's see here. Yes, Virginia Tech, Blacksburg, Virginia, tonight, 6 o'clock, ACC Network X. So there you go. So if you're going to watch, I promise you, we will be out of here within enough time to see the vast majority of that game because Jesse and I both have a few commitments that we need to get to this evening, and so we will be out of here in plenty of time to watch the Fighting Irish. Not to see the entire game. We'll be here a little after that, but to see the Fighting Irish take on the Hokies of Virginia Tech. So appreciate everybody being here. It's a mailbag day. It is a midweek mailbag. It's not exactly obviously midweeks. It's not a Wednesday. But you know what? It's not Monday, it's not Friday, so it's midweek. That's the way I look at it. So it's Thursday. So Jess, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing pretty good. I can't complain for a Thursday.
Okay.
Temperature is a lot better outside. It's like close to 45 degrees. It's not, stubbornly cold. We're almost to the weekend. So, yeah, no complaints on my side. And I'm here with you, and we're doing a great show.
There you go. It's 45. Yep. It's 45 degrees here in not so sunny Granger, Indiana. And obviously it's the warmest day that it's been in quite some time because my offspring is actually out at the football field getting some kicks up. So he's like, Dad, it's beautiful outside. I got to get out there. Okay. I don't know about your definition of beautiful, but it's definitely nicer than it's been. So, yeah, fun never stops over here in the D'Addario household. That's for sure. So, hey, let's just jump right in. Obviously, our man, Salty Virginia Peanuts, has unloaded with questions. And so obviously we're going to use a bunch of his, but we're also going to use a bunch of everybody else's as well. So don't be turned off by the fact that Salty just dropped 15 questions into the hopper.
We'll skip them if we need to.
Yeah, get your questions in. But Salty does a great job of keeping the show going. I mean, if people aren't going to participate, we've got plenty of questions to get to. That's absolutely for certain. So we got a bunch of questions in here. So we're just going to start getting after it. Like I said, it's a mailbag day. So if you've got a question, put a little MB at the front, maybe the little mailbox emoji, and we will do our best to answer said questions. All right. So welcome everybody to IB Nation Sports Talk. Let's get it on. All right, let's see here. Let's see where do we want to start? Let's see. Oh, okay, there we go. Let's start with we'll start with one from Salty. Here we go. This is an interesting one.
With Chris Ash hired as a defensive coordinator, is this part of a developmental plan for Mickens?
Obviously it's all speculation on our part as to, what the thought process was with Marcus Freeman and how he was going to go about making this hire and all of those things. Right. So I feel like it may be something along those lines. I mean, they're going to elevate Mickens supposedly from what we're hearing to co-defensive coordinator. You're bringing in a guy with You're bringing in a guy that has there's restrictions on him, right? Like he can't bring any of his own guys in. He's probably going to have to stay under the philosophy of Marcus Freeman, what he wants to do defensively. He's being saddled with a co-defensive coordinator, right? I mean, so there's a lot of boxes that needed to be checked on who they were going to bring in because of all these other things that were going to happen to that person. I feel like Marcus Freeman, without giving Mike Mickens the job, is going out of his way to make sure that Mike is as happy as possible without getting the job. Does that make sense? Like He's giving him a new title. He's going to give him a pay raise. It may not be more responsibility per se, but I still feel like he is a very wanted person on the staff. He's a very valued member of the staff. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like he is going out of his way to make sure Mike Mickens is happy. So it does feel a little bit developmental. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say, traditionally when a defensive coordinator comes in, it's like his whole staff, down to the linebackers coach, defensive line coach, secondary coach, safeties coach. Like, you get to usually bring in your whole staff, but that's obviously not going to be the case. And so, like you were saying, when there's all of these things kind of set up and I wouldn't call it handcuffing because I don't think it is, but it's very obvious. And I think I tried to kind of talk through this a little bit on Tuesday, is the skeleton or the structure is in place for what Notre Dame's defense is going to be. It's just basically, I think Marcus Freeman went out and found a guy who aligns pretty much similarly to what they've already got going on. And so you don't want to overhaul your defense, and you don't want to have to teach these guys new fundamentals or things like that. Like, they're predominantly going to run the same stuff. And you look at Chris Ash, I mean, he's a guy who loves to bring pressure. He's a guy who I think aligns very similar to Al Golden. Really, the only difference is going to be, like in-game type situations, how he's actually calling the defense, when he's bringing certain stunts, what kind of adjustments he makes at halftime. I really think that's going to be, the true differences that you see. But to me, the skeleton still remains. A lot of the defense is going to remain the same. And so you have to believe someone like Mike Mickens is going to have a huge role in that and maybe be in that kind of co-defensive coordinator position.
Yep. I agree. It's going to be interesting to see. Like we kind of talked about this on Monday a little bit on the show, and you guys probably touched on it on Tuesday as well. Like, I don't have like a fiery opinion on Chris Ash one way or the other. I care about what he does with a Notre Dame crest on his shirt. You know what I mean? Like, talk to me in October and I'll let you know my thoughts on Chris Ash and how things are going. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't know enough about him to form an educated opinion. And, I do trust Marcus Freeman. I mean, not blindly, but I do trust Marcus Freeman. And so I'm, very interested to see how this thing goes, to be honest with you. So my opinion is out there. I'm going to wait on the overall opinion.
I would say, like, let's put it like this. Ash is going to be defensive coordinator, but the next person in line that's going to have the most sway and voice is going to be Mike Mickens. And so, again, like, if you're talking about, ranking order in terms of, power and control on defense, Chris Ash is going to be defensive coordinator, but Mike Mickens is right there. And whether that's, 1A, 1B, 1 or 2, like, he is the next guy in line, right, and going to have, the most say outside of Chris Ash. So, doing whatever you need to do to keep him on staff is important because of, what the safeties and corners have developed into these last few years, what he's doing on a recruiting level. And Chris Ash himself, started as a defensive back coach. So, like, if there's one thing that's going to be good at Notre Dame, I can guarantee it's going to be the secondary.
There you go. Tyler gave us a super chat, and so I am going to hold on to that because we've got a question in rapid fire, Tyler, that kind of addresses your super chat. So we are going to get to it, but I'm going to hold on to it just because it does align with one of our questions in rapid fire because that's a great question right there. So we are definitely going to get to that. To kind of go along with this one, Andre has a question about the entire coaching staff.
Mailbag, what is your confidence level, the current coaching staff to get back? What is your current confidence level in the current coaching staff to get back to the playoffs?
I mean, this is a great question, right? But here's the thing. The coaching staff just got to the playoff and got to the national championship game, and you've only changed one person. And that's obviously the defensive coordinator, which is a big spot, okay? But if you're going to change a coach with Marcus Freeman as your head coach, the defensive coordinator would be it. I guess is the best way to put it. You know what I mean? Like there's going to be a lot less question marks, I feel like, defensively than there would be if you were changing the offensive coordinator. And they just made it to the national championship game with a brand new offensive coordinator. And at the moment, no other coach has moved on. It's the same coaching staff, top to bottom, except for one spot. So my confidence level is fairly high, to be honest with you, that this coaching staff can get them back to the playoff. I mean, I think the schedule sets up for it. I think the strength of schedule is tough enough that you could potentially sustain a loss in there someplace and still be able to make the playoff. And, you know, I don't know that this staff is going to miss much of a beat. I guess maybe that's being rose-colored. I got my glasses on today. Maybe that's rose-colored. I don't know. But I don't feel like they're going to take much of a step back from a coaching standpoint.
I don't think so either. Because of a lot of kind of what I was saying in my last answer, like the skeleton and a lot of the same coaches are going to be there defensively. Not a lot is changing offensively. And, you know, there's rumors about Joe Rudolph, and I think we'll get to that in another mailbag question. But, you know, it's not – as long as Marcus Freeman is in charge and, you know, kind of delegating and deciding who is going to fill these roles, and the roster continues to improve the way we did, and we start seeing these younger guys, super talented guys, get on the field sooner and sooner, I don't really think that – I don't see that they've taken a step back by any means. And what, you know, kind of further what I would say is you were talking about, you know, one loss. I think a one-loss Notre Dame team is always going to be in the playoff. I mean, they lost to Northern Illinois and they made it in.
Right.
I think the question kind of becomes if you start suffering 2 or 3 losses. I think 3 losses, there's not a chance. We just saw that, you know, with what happened with some of those SEC teams that had 3 losses and they're in a conference. So I think undefeated for sure, obviously, is going to get you in no matter what. I think 1 loss is going to get you in no matter what. And I think the gray area becomes, you know, what if you suffer 2 losses in the regular season. So I don't, you know, Notre Dame's schedule is a little bit difficult up front with, you know, Miami, Texas A&M, Boise State, and Arkansas. And I think that's going to be their toughest kind of block in the schedule.
Sure.
But I think that I'm not worried by any means of them getting back to the playoffs to kind of wrap up this answer.
Yep, I'm with you. I'm absolutely with you on that one. Here's an interesting one from Salty.
With a more traditional passing quarterback, will Malachi Fields and the Great One be the top targets next season?
You want to take this one? You can lead off.
Yeah, we on Tuesday talked about Notre Dame's biggest priorities this offseason, and I put finding your starting quarterback as my top priority over, you know, the defensive coordinator and Chad Bowden leaving. And the reason I said that is because of the 3 quarterbacks in the room, Angeli, Minchie, and Carr, none of them are a true dual threat like Riley Leonard. Like, they don't have the legs that Riley Leonard had. And so I think this offense is going to change to a degree because I think obviously they can throw better than what Riley Leonard could. So, you know, this isn't going to be you're not going to see, you know, Angeli, Carr, or Minchie just taking straight QB power up the middle like we saw with Riley Leonard. Like, there's going to be a different kind of shift in the playbook, and it's going to, I think, lean towards, you know, of dual threat quarterbacks, you think of legs and arm. I think it's going to, with these quarterbacks, it's going to lean more towards their arm, and with Riley Leonard, it leans more towards, you know, his playmaking ability with his legs. So I think naturally the wide receivers are going to be more involved this season, and you start looking at, well, who should that be? I mean, look at what Jaden Greathouse just did against some of the top defenses in the country during the playoffs. And then considering, you know, I also thought a top priority is Notre Dame needs a wide receiver to establish themselves, like 1,000-yard legit wide receiver. And so if I'm looking at who the best candidates would be, it would be, Jaden Greathouse, considering, you know, what he's kind of done in his first 2 seasons. I still think there's a ton of room for growth, but that's also why you have Malachi Fields, a guy who's proven experience and someone that you can kind of fall back onto alongside with Jaden Greathouse. So naturally, I think those 2 guys make the most sense.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you look at, you know, production and things like that, returning production, I mean, you've got 3 guys that are going to be fighting for, top dog status, if you will. I think it's going to be Fields. I think it's going to be Greathouse. I think it's going to be Faison. I think those are the three guys that have the most production that's returning. Now, there's a lot of talent also in that room, a lot of untapped into talent at this point, right? You've got Micah Gilbert that everybody was excited about last spring. You've got Cam Williams sitting there. You got KK Smith, Logan Saldate. There's a lot of guys with the ability to, make some plays. Bottom line, make some plays. But I think you are going to have a more traditional passing quarterback, no matter who wins the job out of those three guys. And I think Malachi Fields and Jaden Greathouse are going to be the biggest recipients of that, of that change. And you're right, Jesse. It's not just going to be, obviously they're not going to be running power with the quarterbacks, right? All three of those guys are athletes. All three of those guys are willing runners. They can all move the chains if they need to from a scrambling standpoint, but there's not going to be a bunch of quarterback, design runs. There's going to be some RPOs. There are going to be things of that nature, and they're going to be successful with it. But, those carries aren't necessarily going to just go to the running backs, right? It's going to be an RPO situation. It's going to be short throws. It's going to be, the ball is going to get spread out a little bit more than it has in the past, or at least I shouldn't even say that. I should say it's going to get spread out more than it was in 24 because you've got more of a pocket passer, traditional passing quarterback. And I think it's also more in line with what Mike Denbrock wants to do anyway. So, yeah, I think those two guys are going to benefit the most from the change in quarterback, whoever that might be, for sure. All right, we're getting some good ones rolling in here. Let's see here. Let's throw this one up here from Bubs real quick.
Rumors are Blanchard from Texas Tech may be the new GM. Any opinion on him?
The only opinion I have is what I'm hearing, through the grapevine, is that he's an up and comer. He's a riser, in the world of GMing, in college football. USC wanted him last year, and Texas Tech paid him a bunch of money to stick around. I believe they pay, from what I saw, I believe he got a 2-year contract worth $800,000. So 800 divided by 2 means he was making $400,000. I believe that's more than Chad Bowden was making in Notre Dame. And so what does that look like from a money standpoint? I think Lubbock, Texas is a pretty, I don't know this for sure. Maybe people that live in Texas can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you can probably get a lot of living done on $400,000 a year down in Lubbock, Texas, same as you can up here in South Bend, Indiana. So I'm curious to see if they're willing to match that, if they're willing to pay more than that, because that means they're willing to pay more for this guy than they were for Chad Bowden. He's an up-and-comer. I've heard nothing but good things about this guy. Young, talented, go-getter, all of that. So I guess we'll see if he ends up being the guy. The 2 to 3 month vetting process that Notre Dame goes through, we'll find out eventually. But I've heard nothing but good things. He sounds like a young, energetic guy, and that's what you want in your recruiting office.
Yeah, so kind of some of the preliminary stuff that I've been reading about Blanchard and kind of my own research as well is, he started off with Matt Rule at Baylor and then ended up going on to the NFL for a little bit. While with Matt Rule with the Carolina Panthers, and then rejoined Baylor back in 2021 because Rule's time in the NFL didn't last super long.
No, it didn't.
And from there he ended up going from Baylor to Texas Tech, and he was identified, like you were saying, as someone who was, I believe there was an On3 article, honestly, that released him as one of the top rising personnel and recruiting staffers in college football. And since joining Texas Tech, in 2 seasons, Texas Tech has consecutive top 25 classes. They even got up, I think their 2023 class even got close to, I think, number 20 overall. So, a guy that came in and immediately made an impact and, gave Texas Tech, consecutive top 25 recruiting classes. I think that's pretty substantial. I think that's really impressive for a school that didn't really necessarily have a track record of, bringing in top talent recruiting classes, right? And so to me, that shows that's beneficial for a couple of reasons. One, Texas Tech, I don't think, has nearly the resources that Notre Dame has. And I think it's important to have a guy who can plant a flag in a state like Texas, right? So, like, he's now a guy that can be, if he does decide to join Notre Dame, he's got roots in Texas. He knows the high schools in Texas. He knows recruits. He knows players in Texas. And so Notre Dame potentially tapping into that market, a state like Texas where there's a lot of great football, I think that's really positive. So I guess kind of how I would wrap this up is, if he can have that kind of success at Texas Tech and have top 25 recruiting classes, I think he can have even more success at Notre Dame. And that's something to be, excited about.
No doubt. No doubt. And, there's nothing wrong with fresh blood either. You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with some new blood in there. I think it's kind of exciting to see what he's going to be able to bring to the table for sure. This is kind of something we've talked about in the past, Jesse. I'll read it and I'll let you answer. Let's see here from Salty. Would the Irish have had as good of a season if they had not lost to NIU?
I mean, it's really hard to say, but obviously it motivated them in a way, and put their backs up against the wall, essentially, right? Like, Notre Dame had a mulligan last season, whether it was Texas A&M, NIU, USC, whoever it was going to be. They could sustain a loss and probably be okay. But obviously the worst team to lose to or use that mulligan on was Northern Illinois, because I was looking at some stuff that there's a lot of like advanced stats people that I follow on Twitter. And this guy was saying basically, Notre Dame's loss to NIU was like the biggest upset in the last decade. Like, if you want to actually put it into, realistic
like
terms.
A numbers situation.
Considering all things, like, it was the biggest upset in the last decade. So, I think that did something to the team of giving them a sense of urgency, putting their backs up against the wall. And so, I don't know if you could say as good as, but it definitely lit a fire under them and got things going in the right direction and really eliminated that margin for error, right? Like, there was no more after that point. And so I don't know if that's what that team needed. And it's hard to say, what happens if they did beat Northern Illinois. But I see it as a blessing because of, obviously they end up making a run to the national championship. But I think, again, it lit a fire under them and it carried them the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think it became like a mantra. Like, it became their identity, to be perfectly honest with you. And I mean that in a very positive way. Like, they may not have had the chip on their shoulder that they needed to have without it. I mean, you never want to say that you need to lose to win.
Right.
But at the same time, I get it. Like, I understand how they used it as motivation, how they used it to galvanize their team, and how they used it to be basically a one game at a time. We're in the playoff now on September 7th. You know what I mean? Like, they used it. And, Riley Leonard's talked about this a bunch of times. He went from the highest of highs, beating A&M on the road, to the lowest of lows, losing to NIU in your home opener. I mean, it doesn't get any lower than that. And, he used that as fuel as well. And Marcus Freeman did a wonderful job of using that as fuel. So I think that's the way it ended up. I don't know that I can't say that they wouldn't have gone to the national championship game without it, but it definitely became part of their DNA. It became part of the 2024 team's foundation and their DNA. It's like, yeah, we lost to NIU. That's not going to happen again. Like, that's who they became. You know what I mean? So maybe they make it, but they're not the same team making it, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah,
I don't know if they needed it, but they used it. They used it very beneficially. And I think that was really important. There's one from Tyler Evans.
What do you fellas think about the 2025 schedule?
I think it provides some challenge. There's no doubt about it. I think, I kind of like the fact that you open up with a big game. I've never been a big fan of opening up with like a powder puff type game and, a warm up game or whatever. Like, dude, let's go. Let's open up, let's go to Miami, Hard Rock Stadium, 7:30, on a Sunday night. You know what I mean? Like, I'm cool with that. I have no problem with that. And then, like you said, the front end of the schedule is tough. You don't really want to slip up anywhere in this front end, right? You got Miami, you got A&M, you got Arkansas. Boise State's not a pushover. Yeah, they're a group of 5, but they're not a pushover. They're a good program. They've been a good program for a long time. They don't have Ashton Genty. I get that. But at the same time, they're still who they are. They're still going to come. They're still going to fight. They still have in their DNA to beat big teams and to play them tough on the road. That's a tough beginning of the schedule. Now the back end of the schedule isn't great. Now we don't. Let's see here. I gotta
never know what Pitt and Syracuse are going to be.
I know the Cuse is supposed to be better this year than they have been. I'm a little disappointed in the fact that they still have Stanford on the schedule, to be perfectly honest with you. Not super happy about that. But the middle to back end of the schedule isn't great, but Notre Dame's not gonna be able to let up. Like, they still need to dominate that end of the schedule. And so I'm sure they'll, as other teams are falling by the wayside and Notre Dame's beating up on lesser opponents, I'm sure they're going to get a lot of crap for that, but they've got plenty of strength of schedule, in my opinion, as well. I don't mind the 25 schedule. I really don't. My only issue with the 25 schedule is they don't really go anywhere all that fun, in my opinion. Like, there's no game on here I'm like, man, that's the one I want to go to, like on the road. But other than that, I think it's good. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that the first month of the season is really going to be the most challenging part. Playing at Arkansas, I think, will be a tough environment. It's a SEC school on the road. Luckily, you get Texas A&M at home, but I think Texas A&M is going to be better than what they were last season. Playing at Miami, I think getting them at the beginning of the season might be beneficial, because I don't know if Stetson Bennett's going to be recovered from that UCL injury, to be honest with you, by opening kickoff. So that might be something that plays into Notre Dame's favor. But I think
you mean Beck?
Yeah, sorry, Carson Beck, not Stetson Bennett. And then you start talking about, I don't think that USC kind of in the middle of the season is a game to overlook as well.
Oh, sure.
I know it's at home, but I think Lincoln Riley is, in pretty a crucial year for himself and in the program of, is this the right direction we need to head in? And we saw who the quarterback was going to be, last season. So, they're bringing back experience. I know they lost a lot of guys in the portal, but it's still a very important year for USC. It's a rival. It's at home. They still, you know what I mean? It's going to be a big game. And so having that, right before the second bye week, I think that's this after the second bye week is, I think, when we'll have a really good understanding of, what this team is and what they can kind of accomplish the rest of the season, with Boston College, Navy, Pitt, Syracuse, and Stanford left on the schedule. But I think that the number one thing that's pretty glaring to me is you got the 2 bye weeks, and there's no MAC school on the schedule this year.
No?
There's no Division I AA. I mean, these are all relatively, you can, say what you want about Boston College and maybe Pitt and, Stanford and Purdue, but these are all Power 4 teams. Really, the I guess the slouches you would say on their schedule are supposed to be Navy and Boise State, and Boise State just came off their best program year. So,
right,
like you said, they're not going to be the same without Genty, but it's still a lot of meat on that schedule, and I think that's going to be beneficial for them down the stretch. So I really look to see, right after that USC and then going into the second bye week, I think that's where we're going to really have an understanding of, what this team is and what some realistic expectations are for the rest of the season.
Yeah, no, that's definitely fair. Here's an interesting one from Salty, and I'll pose it to you. Which offensive lineman was most effective during the playoffs?
Which offensive line player was most effective during the playoffs? I mean, that's really hard to say, because I feel like there were some games like, I thought Emil Wagner struggled in some games and obviously played well. Rocco Spindler was obviously battling, injury, but still had some good games. Pat Coogan, was probably the most consistent player. And then, Anthony Knapp gets hurt at some point. So, if I had to say who was the most effective, I'd have to say go with the guy who's got a lot of experience, was consistently out there, never really got hit with the injury bug. So, and was just a leader of the group as well. So for me, it'd have to be Pat Coogan at the end of the day because of, his ability to step up in the role, what he did leadership wise. He obviously wasn't the most talented player, but he still commanded the room and got those guys to, basically what I'm alluding to is the pregame speeches, a guy who can fire up his unit, get them motivated. And I think that goes a long way. So I would have to default to either Coogan or, Shrouth, but Shrouth had injuries too at some point. So I liked the guy who was consistently in every game, and that's where I'm going to go with this.
Well, if that's your criteria, then it's got to be Emil Wagner. He's the only one that started 16 games.
That's true.
So for me, it's either Emil for that very reason or Charles Jagasaw, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I just wish Jagasaw could have played the whole playoffs.
Right. I get it. The good thing about this offensive line is each one of them had kind of a moment where they were dominant. You know what I mean? Like there wasn't one specific weak link in the playoff. I thought, as a whole, they played fairly well. They had a lot going up against them, obviously, when they were playing against, Ohio State and Penn State and Georgia. But, they played well. They played well overall. So if I was going to name somebody, it would either be Emil Wagner or Charles Jagasaw. Those would be the two for me from the playoff run. Big Hoss with a super chat. I'm very you and I are a different age, so I'm very curious to see kind of where you go with this one. He's first of all, thanks for the super chat, Big Hoss. Appreciate you very much. He says, I'm a bit football fatigued. I get that. So allow me to change it up here. Could you guys give a Mount Rushmore of TV shows? Love the show. Go Irish. TV shows. Best of all time. What comes to your mind first?
I can give you like a Mount Rush. Well, the thing is, Vince, is I don't watch nearly as much TV and movies.
I get it.
As
it's a new generation. Like TV shows.
My dad and yourself.
I know.
I can. Why don't you go
first? This is one I almost want to save for your dad for tomorrow. So we're gonna attack this, Big Hoss, but we're also going to bring it back up tomorrow when Sean's on the show for a little Friday Fire, because I think this is a really good one. And so top of mind for me would be Seinfeld. It's one of the best. I mean, Seinfeld's one of the best. Friends is right up there for me as one of the best. Those two come to mind right away. Friday Night Lights with Kyle Chandler and that whole group.
That's on mine as well. You can put that up there for sure.
Friday Night Lights is one of my absolute favorites, and they're rebooting it, Jesse. Did you see that? They're rebooting it.
I saw rumors. I didn't know if it was official or not.
What I've heard, I've heard it's going to be on Peacock, and it's not going to have any of the original cast in it. So it's going to be like the same universe, but 15 years later.
I have mine, and I want to get it out before I forget.
Okay, what do you got?
Friday Night Lights.
Okay.
Ted Lasso.
Oh, Ted Lasso. Okay.
And
what did you say after Friday Night Lights? Because you cut out.
Lost.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Your dad loves that one.
Yeah, we watched that whole one together. And then I don't know if many people have heard of this one. I know it's a popular show, but I don't know specifically this demographic of people. It's on Netflix. It's called New Girl. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
I've heard of it, but yeah. I'm surprised it's one of yours.
Great show. It's just like one of those shows, like a lot during like college and grad school. I've watched it twice, but they're just such funny, quick 20-minute episodes that I don't mind. And so it was just one of those. I feel like it's my generation's version of Friends, if we're being honest with you.
I got you.
It's maybe the best way I can put that.
That's fair. Because Friends was right in my wheelhouse. That was like high school-ish for me, like when I'm watching TV, that kind of a deal. This is not one of mine. I want to be very clear on that. But when I was in college, like the must-see TV when I would be going over to the girls' dorms and stuff was like Dawson's Creek, stuff like that. Like they would all gather. Remember, this is back in the day, right? So they would all gather in the common room and watch on the TV because it would be live and they, whatever. I'm trying to think of any other ones that was like must see TV because like you can go back and you can be like, Saved by the Bell, anything like Full House, like that kind of stuff. Like those were big ones for me growing up. But I don't know if they qualify as like the best TV of all time. You know what I mean? So we are going to come back to this. Luke says Breaking Bad. I've heard that's really good. I've never seen that one. I never saw Lost either. There's West Wing. I gotta throw one out there for West Wing. I really enjoyed West Wing. I like those kind of political dramas, and that one was kind of one of the first of its kind. So West Wing is definitely one for me. Tom says Game of Thrones. I know that's one your dad really likes. So he's going to be he's going to be a Game of Thrones guy. He's going to be a Breaking Bad guy.
Well, the thing is he's not going to be able to narrow it down to 4 because he watches so many good shows. He's going to have a really hard time with that aspect.
That's a solid point. That's actually a really good point. So yeah, we are going to revisit this one tomorrow. Are you going to be on the show tomorrow, Jesse?
Yes.
Okay. Help remind me to come back to Big Hoss's question for tomorrow. It's going to be a 2-day super chat is what this one's going to be. So I'm excited to kind of get back at that, see what he's got to say. Luke with the King of Queens. That's a underrated show, by the way. King of Queens. I like that one a lot. All right, let's see. Let's get to a few more here. I'll throw this one up there. Go ahead.
Does Freeman do his best coaching when he is pissed off? I think it leads to more motivation at the end of the day, right? I think I don't think he's necessarily coaching pissed off. I think he's just using that as fuel for anger and aggression to get his players kind of fired up to play with the same anger and aggression. But Vince, you can't, as a coach, you can't coach too high. You can't coach too low. Right. You can't be too mad. You can't be too happy. I think he understands those things. And so, coaching pissed off, no, but I think he lets certain things kind of find its way back to his team. And again, it kind of goes back to NIU. Like it's almost like a motivator type situation or creating that fire underneath their butts a little bit of, this James Franklin was like looking at me crazy and made a comment about my age and my hairline and, insinuated that we need to be in a conference and all this. Like, that's what I mean. Like, I don't think he's coaching mad. I just think he finds ways to allow it to be motivation. I don't know what you think.
No, I like that. And I think he's also realized over the last few years that his team feeds off his enthusiasm and his emotion as well. I don't think he kind of realized that early on in his tenure as the head coach. I think he realizes it now. And you can tell with how fired up he gets at games and in pregame and, all of these different times. I think, you want your team to be a representation of who you are. And I think Marcus Freeman has adjusted a little bit of who he is. And when, as DK would say, when he gets fired up, his players follow. I think that's absolutely accurate. And I think that's good for college. Like that's good for 18 to 22-year-old kids. You know what I mean? It's different in the pros that might not work as well. Right. But I think it works really well in college. And I think Marcus Freeman has kind of cornered the market on using emotion in a positive way as the head coach. So that's actually a good question. I like that. I like that one a lot. Let's see here. From Andre's got a question about spring ball.
What position group has the most to prove this spring? I would have to say either quarterback or wide receiver.
I like that. Quarterback for me, I think because I mean, this is like situation where there's three distinct camps of people. You know what I mean? There's not a clear-cut one that everybody wants. And I think they've got the most to prove, right? The offensive line room doesn't have the most to prove because they're all freaking good. Like, I'm not worried about that. They're going to have the most. The offensive line is going to have the most competition,
most to lose,
right? But I don't think they have the most to prove. Like, they've proven that they're really good. Like, I don't. Whoever they decide is the top 5, they're going to be really good. So I don't think they have the most to prove. I think quarterback has the most to prove because we don't know what they can do. We don't. You know, Steve Angeli has the most playing time, one start of all 3 of them, and we still don't know what he can do when he's the actual starter of the team. You know, so I'm going with quarterback on this one, but I can see an argument for wide receiver. You want to make that argument?
Yeah, I think that like I said earlier, this team needs. If Notre Dame has a legit passing attack that scares Ohio State, I think there's an even better chance that they win that game. I think them having a legit passing attack on top of a legit running attack is what's going to take this offense to the next level. And what you need is a stud wide receiver like a Jeremiah Smith, where everyone knows he's that guy on the field, but they can't stop him. You know, over 1,000 yards, 10 receiving touchdowns. Like, they just need a workhorse in the wide receiver room where even if you know all is going wrong, but you need 5 yards because it's 3rd and 5,
right?
We're going to throw it to this guy, and there's nothing you can do to stop. Like, that's what I mean in terms of, like, they need a dude at wide receiver. And I think they haven't had one. And, like, the last time I thought of, like, a dude at the wide receiver position is, like, Michael Floyd, Golden Tate. You know what I mean? Like, they haven't had someone where, again, like, all else goes wrong, like a Jeremiah Smith, we're going to just drop back and throw it to him, and we know he's going to go make a play type situation.
Yeah, they haven't had that guy in a little while, no doubt. I want to quickly answer this one for Bubs. He says, have you guys done a show on the Tyre Merrill commitment yet? On the afternoon show, it is. They did do it at the very end of the show. They did almost an hour on it. That audio has already been posted on the podcast. And we cut the video out of the big show, and that is currently uploading. It is at 50%, and then it'll be up on YouTube as a separate video from this afternoon show. So it's coming. It'll be here very soon, but the audio version is available right now wherever you get your podcasts. So you can go check that out. I cut that up before we started this show. So it is definitely out there, and I'm sure that Brian and Trevor got after it pretty hard about the Merrill signing or the Merrill commitment, excuse me. It's big time. It's big time. I don't know what they said, but it's big time. So, yeah, their reactions there. Let's see. Where do we want to go next? All right, we did that one. How about this one from Outbound?
How much more involved is Freeman with the defense as far as game planning than with the offense? Or is he just approve plans, a D just and just lets the coordinators do their thing? I don't think Marcus Freeman is really involved that much, like on either side of the ball, to be honest with you. I think it's like imagine you're at work and you're working on a project, and you have a manager ahead of you, and if you've got questions or maybe you're stuck or, maybe you want some input, I think your coordinators might go to Marcus Freeman, but I don't think Marcus Freeman is actively putting his hands in the offensive or defensive game plans or, play calling or that sort of stuff. But he is a resource to them at the end of the day, right? Like if they need an input or, an opinion, then yeah, but he's not going out of his way to get his hands in that stuff.
And I think his philosophy is like an overarching deal, right? Like, hey guys, this is who we want to be. Now go ahead and put together a game plan within those parameters. You know what I mean? And I look, and I think that evolved obviously as the season went on, right? As far as how the play calling went and how all of those things went, because I think even Marcus Freeman loosened the reins offensively. And I think that, defensively, he let Al Golden make the game plan. He let, Mike Denbrock make the game plan. But like you said, he was definitely available, but everything was under his philosophy as the head coach, right? The head coach has a philosophy. The head coach has a way that he wants the offense and the defense to operate. He said it a million times. He wants to be a line-driven program, a run-first program, and that's what they're going to be at the end of the day. But the nitty-gritty, the day-to-day, the game planning specifics are going to be left up to the coordinators. We'll see what happens this coming year. You know what I mean? With a new D coordinator, Al Gold was in his third year, and not everybody was on board with the Al Golden hire when he was hired. Let's not forget that, right? And now it's the worst thing that he left. So I'm sure as a new coach, there's going to be some guardrails and some things along those lines. But as they get comfortable with each other, I think the reins get taken off of a little bit, and the training wheels and that kind of a deal. So he's involved, but he's not. I don't think he's involved in the day to day. But that's honestly, that's speculation on our part. So it is what it is. We got a couple more here I want to get to before we get to rapid fire, Jesse. This one from Isaiah Lehman. Do you think the staff was set on redshirting Micah Gilbert from the jump of the season? He played so well in the spring game, and I was confused as to why he didn't get minutes.
I think you can answer this one the best, Vince.
I don't know for sure what the staff is thinking, obviously, but I do think that there were guys that were ahead of him that earned the playing time. There was no need to take his red shirt at this point with the way that the offense was operating. Right. The guys that were in the rotation could handle what was being asked of the wide receivers. Mm-hmm. He's going to be a more dynamic player with a more dynamic thrower of the football. Right. And that's going to happen this year. Right. So, there was no need to take the red shirt off of him, in my opinion. I don't know that they went into the season with that mindset. You know what I mean, Jess? But I think, once they figured out, okay, this is going to be the offense that we're going to run, the guys in the rotation can handle it.
Yeah, and I think to kind of, maybe tag along or add some more to that, Marcus Sherman always talks about trust, right? And you're going to get on you're going to earn your playing time through trust. And so, there's often guys who can make some wow plays here and there, and that's all fine. But, are you doing it consistently every day? Are you doing it, outside of the spring game? Are you doing it when they're game planning for an opponent? Are you, right. Are you doing the little things right and earning that trust to get on the field? And so, again, while he might be able to create more of those wow or explosive plays, I don't know that necessarily fit into their offensive kind of game plan this season. And again, it goes to outside of just, running the play. You got to have the right splits. You got to line up in the right spot. Sure. You got to know, motioning where you need to go to. Like, there's more to than just running routes and catching the ball, I guess is what I'm getting at. And so, right. Again, he might have made some wild plays, but is he doing the consistent things, little things every practice, every day, and earning that trust to get out on the field?
Well, and with, Jaden Thomas and Colsey transferring and then Bo Collins leaving, I think it does open up a path for Micah Gilbert to get on the field. So he's going to have every opportunity to play. There's no doubt about that. He's going to have every opportunity to play this year, and he'll be a redshirt freshman and have every opportunity to be the dynamic player that we think he can be. And Cam Williams, I think I would put in that same boat. He's got every opportunity to play as well. They kind of took the top off of the offensive room with some of these guys leaving. Mitchell obviously left as well. So, I mean, there's going to be some opportunities here for these guys that didn't play a lot or at all this past season. And that's welcome to college football. All right. I mean, that's just kind of how it works, especially when you bring in 1-year rentals. I mean, that's the way it goes. So, but again, definitely with Colsey and Thomas leaving, definitely should open the door for Micah Gilbert, which is a good thing. Get some youth on the field. Mark Avalone wants to know, how sophisticated are high school defenses in games? We practiced a lot of stunts in my day, but in games, it was usually the same base defense every play, except for goal line defense formation. You, sir, played on a defense in high school. How sophisticated, and you played on a defense in college. So how sophisticated was high school in comparison to college?
It was a walk in the park compared to college, to be honest with you.
Exactly.
You kind of have some, and what's crazy is, it being 2025 now. I graduated in 2014, so that was, going on 11 years, and that was my senior year. So, going back even further, it's been like 14, 15 years since being, getting into varsity as a first timer in high school. But, the defense wasn't necessarily overcomplicated, right? Like the defensive lineman usually had a stunt. The linebackers needed to know basically what gap to fill off of that stunt. And then you had some kind of, different coverages that you'd run on the back end. But it was, and obviously some blitz formations and stuff like that. But I mean, really, to me, the majority of the sophistication came when we played the triple option teams, because one, it felt like we didn't really ever get it right. And two, it's just a hard thing to cover in high school.
Yeah.
So you're constantly trying to tweak things and figure out, what's going to work and what's not. But it is vastly different than what I experienced in college. And, not all high schools are the same, obviously. But it was like a complete one. Like the amount that I had to know in college was a lot different. But you have to realize, too, playing linebacker in college, you kind of have to know what everyone's going to do, because you are responsible for run and pass. And so, primarily defensive lineman, it's not an overly hard job. You're either stopping the run or rushing the quarterback, right? But as a linebacker, you have to understand what's happening in both the run and pass game, and, figure out what your run responsibilities are. And if it is a pass, you have to be able to get into pass as well. And you run much more complex coverages in college compared to high school. And to be honest with you too, in high school, it was just a lot of kind of just plugging your gap, like you had the A or B gap. But in college, you're actually reading offensive linemen, you're reading what kind of run players are coming at you, and that kind of dictates, what your run fit is going to be. So, long story short, I didn't think our high school was overly complicated. But again, everyone else can, every defense in every school is going to be different. So.
And obviously the biggest difference between high school and college is that you can recruit to what you want in college. And when you do that, you can be a little bit more sophisticated and a little bit more complicated, because you now have the brains and the body to fill what you want for that spot. You know what I mean? In high school, you get what you get, man. Unless you're out there recruiting, which obviously plenty of high schools do, you kind of get what you get when it comes to high school. So, you have to kind of tailor your defense to what you're working with in high school. And when that's the case, when you might have a kind of a different looking defense year to year because of the personnel, you can't get too deep into the weeds. You know what I mean? Because you're teaching a new defense and you just want to make sure that they're running it correctly. So it's very difficult to really kind of get in the weeds, especially once you get into the season and stuff like that. You're going to game plan specifically. Like you said, you're going to play a team that's triple option. You're going to play a team that spreads it out. You're going to play an I formation team, or whatever the case may be. So there is some specific week to week game planning, but overall, you're doing a lot of base stuff with a few, variations here and there. Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, as a coach, you operate with the KISS method, man. Keep it simple, stupid. Like that's always that's always at the forefront of everything you're trying to do as a high school coach. There's no doubt about that. DK, I wish that job paid more, because I would do it. He says I should be the Penn recruiting coordinator. I'd be all for it. All right. That's going to do it for the mailbag. Jesse, are you ready for some rapid fire?
Let's take this thing home with some rapid fire.
All right, my man. Here we go. Leading off today, let's talk a little Senior Bowl. So Notre Dame's Riley Leonard, Jack Kaiser, and RJ Oben are participating in this week's Senior Bowl activities. This is a very important event for guys with NFL aspirations. So far, their participation is blank.
Is tremendous, to be honest with you. I've seen Jack Kaiser make an interception over the middle. I've seen him work off of a block and make a tackle on a screen play on the perimeter, kind of showing his quickness and, elusiveness. And then I've seen some clips of on that same interception that Kaiser had, RJ Oben got pressure on the quarterback and I think would have had a sack, but obviously at the Senior Bowl, you just touch him and let him finish the play.
Yeah.
So, he's obviously having a good showing. And then Riley Leonard as well. I've seen some good clips of him. He was under center, hit a nice drop back pass over the middle. I saw that I think another video today where he was like commanding the huddle and working through some nice, progressions and plays. So, I think all they've done this week has tremendously improved their stock. Like their stock hasn't gotten any worse, and it maybe hasn't climbed, a full round by any means, but it definitely is, I think, answering some questions, and I think they're all passing the overall eye test, right? Like I don't think anyone is coming out of the Senior Bowl and been like, man, we feel differently about Kaiser, Leonard and Oben in a bad way, right? I think they're only feeling better about, or feeling differently in a positive way about these guys. So I think it's been a tremendous experience for them. And I love the Reese Senior Bowl. Honestly, one of my bucket list items is to go to one of them for a couple of days. I think it'd just be fun to go down there and like just watch practice. And see some of those guys. It's cool. And it's just the concept or the idea of it is really cool. Helping out, a lot of these senior guys who are on the edge, like a Jack Kaiser, a guy who's played college football for 5 or 6 years, obviously has a bunch of talent. And he's right on that fringe of, is he going to be an NFL starter, or is he going to, be a guy that can make a career in the NFL?
And of course, Marcus Freeman was down there to watch his guys do their thing, which, I don't know how many head coaches take the time to go down, especially this time of year when they're on the road and they're recruiting and they're doing all those things. Because obviously Marcus Freeman, if you are on Twitter or X or whatever the hell it is now, if you're on there, that him and his assistant coaches are all over the country, doing school visits, doing home visits, doing all of the above. And he takes the time to go to the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama. Like, that's just who Marcus Freeman is. Like, if you ever wonder, is it a show? Is it an act? He didn't have to go to Mobile. Like, those guys aren't on his team anymore. You know what I mean? And he's down there supporting those guys. So I thought that was pretty cool. Look, the entire situation, from what I've been able to ascertain from watching some of the clips and things like that, like, people aren't shy about saying who's doing poorly.
Right.
That's for sure. Shiloh Sanders isn't having a great week down at the East-West Shrine Bowl festivities. But it appears as though the 3 Notre Dame guys are all doing well. And they're, they showed Riley Leonard taking a snap from under center, which obviously he didn't do at Notre Dame. Going through his progressions, making good throws. Jack Kaiser's turning some heads, making plays, getting a pick off of Jaden Milroe, which I thought was fantastic. So, those guys are going to be missed. There's no doubt about that. And they're making a name for themselves right now. And we know that the Senior Bowl, like, practices and stuff are way more important than the actual game itself. While I'm looking forward to the game on Saturday and trying to get, my eyes on it,
that's practice not even, is basically an open combine.
That's exactly right. Because there's NFL coaches everywhere at the Senior Bowl. You know what I mean? Like, you're being coached by NFL coaches. There's NFL coaches that are stopping by to check things out. And if people didn't know it before, coaching is a giant fraternity. Like, guys share information about other guys. Like, coaches share information about players all the time. And it's all about who you know, right? And there's going to be a lot of information being passed after this. Like, you didn't know that those 3 guys are going to be good practice players, because they are. And they're just good guys in general. They're easy to coach, all of those different things. I think they're definitely helping themselves out. They're not hurting themselves. That's for sure. So, and on top of that, they were literally in a game a week ago. You know what I mean? Like, they're down there at Senior Bowl practice after completing their 16th game of the season. You know what I mean? So that by itself is pretty impressive. And they all got beat up, during that playoff stretch. So they're doing good things for themselves. There's no doubt about that.
I think Kaiser's interception validates that stupid interception that was taken away from him in the Penn State game. Because it was almost, wasn't the exact same play, but he was making a play
Similar.
ranging in the same direction.
Yeah.
The other ball was thrown more on a line, and he just goes up and gets it. And, obviously the Penn State one was underthrown, and he made a great play on that one too. But yeah, that's the end of my rant on that one.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. So Steve Angeli, Kenny Minchey, and CJ Carr are all vying to become the next starting quarterback at Notre Dame. So we're not going to talk about who we think should be the starter, who we don't think should be the starter, what that's going to look like. But on a scale of 1 to 10, what is your excitement level for the competition itself? Because I feel like it's the first time in a long time that there's a legit competition going on for the starting quarterback at Notre Dame.
Yeah, I would say, to be honest with you, yes, Angeli is going to be a part of this competition, but I think it's a two-man race, to be honest with you. I think it's
you went there. You went there.
I think it's Carr, Minchey. But between those two, my level of excitement would probably be overall like an 8 out of 10, because I think that this is a very pivotal or kind of turning point for Notre Dame football in terms of quarterback recruiting, development, and can they, officially kind of put their foot in the ground and go in-house. And I think CJ Carr and Kenny Minchey are alike in some ways, but they're also very different. And so I want to see them battle it out, right? I want to see, what CJ Carr can do with his arm. I think CJ or Minchey is a bit more mobile and would thrive more in kind of those more RPO type looks. So, I think if Notre Dame wants to take that next step and win the national championship, they need a guy to step up at quarterback and be here for more than 1 year, be a multi-year starter, and take this kind of offense to some new levels. So I would have to put my excitement at an 8 or 9, to be honest with you.
No, I'm with you. I think it's an 8 or a 9 for me as well. I mean, this is going to be a legitimate competition. Like first of all, I'm going to be over it talking about it every single day, but at the same, that's why I want them to name a starter after spring, so we don't have to talk about it all summer, but we're going to have to. So it is what it is, but that's what comes with a competition, right? And I think this is going to be the most fun. Like, how are they going to split the reps? What is it going to look like? What are we actually going to be able to see in the spring of these guys? Are we going to be able to take anything out of what we see, with the three of them going after it? Because Steve Angeli is probably going to get the nod early. He's going to get first team reps, and then Minchey will probably get second team, and Carl will get third team. So what does that look like? Are they gonna mix it up when we're not around? That kind of stuff. So it is a turning point in Notre Dame football. They do need to make some waves with guys that they recruited and that they brought in and that they developed, and they have the perfect opportunity to do that with this competition. So, may the best man win. Obviously, I've got who I think should win. You've got who you think should win. We'll talk about all of that, but the competition itself, I'm actually very excited about. Because I think it is a legit competition. I think it is open. I think some of the coaches are probably just like us. They probably want a certain guy over another guy, and we'll see who's standing at the end, so to speak, right? Hopefully they're all healthy and they get out of spring practice healthy, and I'm really hoping they name a starter by the end of spring, but I don't think we're going to be that lucky. So it's going to be fun to watch. That's for sure. It's going to be the first thing everybody wants to look at when they walk into practice. That's for sure. Because I know I will be, because I just love quarterback play. Let's talk about a little bit of college hoops. So on Saturday, John Calipari returns to Rupp Arena for the first time since taking the Arkansas head coaching position and spurning the Kentucky Wildcats. So do you buy or sell the Kentucky fans booing Cal when he is introduced?
Yeah, this is a huge sell for me, and anyone who boos them, in my opinion, is probably a loser, to be honest with you, because
oh, bam!
Calipari was at Kentucky from 2009 to 2024, and during that time, Vince, he had 410 wins and 123 losses. That's pretty mind-boggling. He has almost quadruple the amount of wins that he does losses, right? And not only is he doing that, that's very impressive. But at Kentucky, when you obviously have the most pressure, and I get it, he's getting all the recruits and that sort of stuff. So yeah, he should be good. But I mean, it's Calipari. He's the guy that's recruiting them. And then, on the flip side of that, outside of just what he did win-wise, he did win the 2012 national championship. He did go to 4 straight Final Four appearances in, 5 seasons. And so, I mean, the man was great. Would you have, if you're a fan, would you have liked him to maybe squeeze out another national championship or 2? Sure. But he still won a national championship. He still had a tremendous record. They won all the time. They literally, for every 5 games, they probably lost 1 game, right? And so, like, at the end of the season, you're talking about teams that are going 25-4, 20, like that sort of range. So, those are tremendous teams. And then the final aspect of it is, look at all the guys he got to the NBA. Like, it's still, yes, you want to win championships and do well for the university, but Vince, at the end of the day, it's about the players and developing them and getting them to their next mission in life, and that was the NBA. So again, the amount of people that the amount of winning that he did, postseason success that he did, and how many guys he got to the league. You're a loser if you boo him. It's sometimes you just got to move on, and it was time for him to move on and get a change of scenery.
The paycheck didn't hurt either from your boy down in Dallas. But I agree with everything that you said. The only thing that I will add, and I guess it even makes it more impressive, is it felt like he had a different team every year.
Yeah, because they were all one and done.
Right. They were all one and done. And look, I don't subscribe to that philosophy, because I like watching college basketball and I like being able to cheer for, a Marcus Burton for 4 years or, whatever the case may be. That's just the first thing that came to my mind. It's what I like about college sports, right? And then you hand it over to the next guy, that kind of a deal. So the one and done thing I don't like, but he was able to have sustained success, basically turning over his entire roster from year to year to year. Like that, I don't care how much talent you have, because obviously he was a cultivator of talent.
They're also young kids. These are kids right out of high school.
Exactly. And that's where they ran into issues, is when they would go up against a team with like a bunch of seniors on it, that had been playing for 3 years together. That's where they would run into some problems. But it's still impressive that they won as many games as they did with basically a bunch of first-year guys every single year. I mean, that's just, like I said, that's just not an easy thing to do. So, don't boo the guy. Be happy that he brought the success that he did to Kentucky, because they weren't really having it before he got there like they had it when he was there. And have they had it since? That's the next question. All right. A couple more here, and then we'll get out of here. So, Mr. Respected Cam Newton was asked whether he would trade his MVP trophy for a Super Bowl trophy. Here's his response. Quote, "I'm taking individual success because I did my job." Unquote. His response to you is blank.
Is undoubtedly selfish, Vince. And I don't know about you, but my starting quarterback, a guy that's supposed to lead my franchise, if he's more concerned about winning an MVP because he did his job compared to winning a Super Bowl title as a team, then quite frankly, that's not my quarterback anymore, right? Like, I don't care how good you are. If you're more worried about your MVP and your personal stats and, well, I can't really control outside of, my lane because I did my job or whatever. That's just, it sounds like a bunch of excuses. And it sounds like a guy who is supposed to be a leader of the team and ultimately didn't lead to the best of his ability, right? Because good leaders, good quarterbacks find ways to, lead and motivate their team to kind of overcome maybe some of those shortcomings. And, I get it to a degree where he's coming from, but at the same time, it's all about team success over personal success. And so, am I surprised he said this? No, but it's just, there's really not much more, like, there's not a more selfish statement that you can make as an athlete than saying, I'm more concerned about my personal stats compared to the team success.
Yeah. I mean,
I feel like you're really trying to moderate yourself with this one.
Yeah.
You could really go off on this one.
Look, I'm not a fan, never have been, never will be. And, And part of that is because some of the takes that he's had this season concerning Notre Dame and all of that. I'll be the first one to admit it. He's not my favorite human because of a lot of those things that he said, but he is an incredibly selfish individual. He always has been. So I can't say that I'm surprised about his comments. I mean, if you just look at his entire career and the way he went about it and, Mr. Superman and all this other stuff, he's always been about himself. So I'm not at all surprised about that. The only people that should take offense to it are anybody that was ever on the same team as him.
Or if you were a Panthers fan and you really,
right.
you know what I mean? Like,
right.
You wanted your team to win.
Good call. Because
I mean, if that's your attitude, then it obviously had to be felt at some point, right? Like, I guarantee guys in the locker room, without him ever saying that, knew that, Cam cares more about himself than he cares about the team. Like, if that's the way you carry yourself, it's going to ooze into the locker room. So
exactly,
it's maybe it was never spoken, but it was definitely the writing had to be on the wall at some point for his teammates.
Yeah, I can't say I'm all that surprised. He's a very selfish individual and just proved it once again, frankly. So yeah, just very typical. And that's a hard guy to follow. Like, your quarterback is supposed to be a leader,
right?
He's never going to be in a huddle again, obviously, so he can say whatever he wants. But I guarantee you, Tom Brady's not going to say something like that.
He would never say something. Patrick Mahomes would never say anything like that.
Peyton Manning, like, name off your quarterbacks, your elite quarterbacks. None of them are ever going to say that. And I highly doubt, like, I'm trying to think of like elite quarterbacks that have never won a Super Bowl. I'll bet you Dan Marino wouldn't say that. He's not going to be like, I did my job. Like, no, he's not going to say that, Allen from Buffalo is probably not going to say that, if he ever won an MVP or whatever. Has he won an MVP? I don't know if he has.
No, but he might win one this year.
Yeah, it's possible. But
I guarantee he would have traded that MVP to beat the Chiefs last week.
Exactly. And Lamar Jackson, he's won an MVP before, and
he
I don't
doesn't care. He's pissed that they don't win a Super Bowl.
Right. So he's just, it's just something. I just not a fan. Not a fan. Glad he never played for my team. All right. Last one of the night. And I'm going to ask this, and then I'm also going to pull up the super chat that we had earlier. So the ACC is close to extending their TV contract with ESPN for an additional 9 years. Now, part of that deal would require Notre Dame to play 2 of the conference's quote-unquote biggest brands each year. So the biggest brands, according to them, are Florida State, Miami, and Clemson. So Notre Dame would have to play 2 out of those 3 every single year on some sort of a rotation. So do you buy or sell this as good for the Irish? That's the question there. And then the question from Tyler, thanks for the super chat, Tyler. Appreciate it. He says, do you think the new ESPN deal with the ACC will save the ACC? So
yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
To answer Tyler's question, I don't know if the ACC ever needed really saved overall. I just think what they're fighting is the Big Ten and the SEC want to be their own standalone thing. I think the ACC has enough to stand on their own, as long as basically, the Big Ten and the SEC decide that to leave, essentially. So, I do think that this is going to do well by the ACC. I think it's going to bring more attention, obviously, probably more money to the ACC, which is going to help them in the long run. And then to go back to your question, Vince, do I buy or sell this as good for the Irish? I do buy this as being good for Notre Dame because, obviously the ACC needs Notre Dame, right? Like they want Notre Dame to play their top teams every year. And, the biggest knock on Notre Dame is they're not in a conference, but they do play a heavy ACC schedule. And so what better way to combat that by, largely saying they're going to play the best teams in the ACC every year, right? Like, when you think of the ACC, you think of Florida State, Miami, and Clemson in football, the teams who are predominantly going to be the most successful, right? And you look at Miami and Florida State, those are teams that Notre Dame already has history with. And we've talked before about how Clemson would be a nice kind of maybe a new rival for Notre Dame because of how much they play each other in the ACC and usually how meaningful the games are. So I'm all for it. I don't think that there's anything wrong with Notre Dame playing, the premier teams in the ACC every year, basically. I think it does well for Notre Dame, and I think it does well for the conference in terms of, ratings and getting the viewers that they want in these games.
People are always talking about Notre Dame needing to beef up their schedule and things like that. And so I have no problem with them playing, getting at least guaranteeing themselves to marquee names, right? Like
Yeah.
Florida State was awful this year, right?
They couldn't plan that.
But yeah, exactly. You can't plan that. And it ended up, it was the night game, right? At Notre Dame Stadium, everything was amazing. And then they blew them out. I mean, okay. But the Florida State Notre Dame name made that game what it is. And so I have no problem with it. I think it's good. I buy it. I think it's good for Notre Dame. It's going to help their strength of schedule.
Right.
Most years. Yes, there might be an off year where the teams suck, right? But as long as Dabo's in charge of Clemson, they're still going to be a good football team. Maybe they're not going to be elite, but they're going to be good. Miami is good. Florida State hopefully can get back to at least being good. And look, Notre Dame's not taking orders from ESPN. They're utilizing their agreement with the ACC. So if ESPN says to the ACC, this is what we want, then the ACC then says to Notre Dame, this is what we're doing. That's how it works, right? And Notre Dame does have to pay a little bit of a price, even though, again, I think it is in Notre Dame's best interest. Notre Dame does have to pay that price for having the rest of their sports in the ACC. I mean, that's just it's part of the give and take, right?
But now I think you get the best of both sides. You get independence and you get to play the best teams in the ACC every year. And so, like you said, it beefs up the schedule. It sells tickets, and everyone's eyeballs are going to be on the game, which is more exposure for Notre Dame. So I don't really see how this could be a negative thing, I guess is what I'm saying.
And Joe wants to know, does it force those games to be away because of the NBC deal? No, it does not force those games to be away games. Those games can still be home games. They're not always going to play Clemson, Florida State, and Miami on the road. Like, that's not going to happen. So they just want to make sure that the strength of schedule is where it's at, and you still get marquee matchups that they can talk about on a regular basis. That's really what it comes down to. So they will not always be on the road. So, all right, Jess. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of IB Nation Sports Talk. Thanks for hanging out on a Thursday. Well, you're always here on a Thursday. I'm the one that's hanging out on a Thursday.
Yes, you are.
But that's going to be kind of the norm here moving forward because of, women's basketball usually plays on a Thursday. And they are currently playing right now, Notre Dame and Virginia Tech. Do you got a score handy? Because I haven't.
19-18, Virginia Tech leads.
Okay, a little bit of a tight one. So everybody's going to want to flip over, get on your Odyssey app, look for Notre Dame women's basketball, listen to Sean Stiers do his thing. And we'll talk about it tomorrow on Friday Fire. So make sure you guys hang out with us tomorrow at 5 o'clock. So for Jesse, I'm Vince. We'll talk to you next time on IB Nation Sports Talk. Have a wonderful day, everybody.